Jacob Quinlan, how's it going, man? Welcome to Permastoked, dude.
Good. Thanks, Derik. Good to have you. Thanks for
Right
having me
on.
on the show. It's really great to meet you.
Man, nice to meet you too, dude. Did I say that properly? Is it Quinlan?
Quinlan. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
Jacob Kelly, do you go by Jacob or Jacob Kelly or
Yeah, it's Jacob. It's I don't know how the whole Jacob Kelly Quinlan thing started, but like it definitely helps in terms of Google. Like I don't think there's
okay.
any other Jacob Kelly Quinlans surfing 100 waves around the world, so it's pretty easy to track me down that way.
Right on. It distinguishes you so you don't get mixed up with the other Jacob Quinlans that are out there.
or like the Kelly Slaters. Like it's not just Kelly. Jacob Kelly is
Nice,
plenty good.
right on. Yeah, the Kelly Slater of river surfing in Canada.
Yeah, I
So
get that a lot.
yeah, right on. That's a pretty cool name to have, dude. I gotta say. Yeah. So man, I'm stoked because here we are sitting with Jacob Quinlan from the river scene, and I've had an immense curiosity about river surfing. It's been, I'd say, it started with knowing about river sup, and the idea of supping down a river fascinated me. And then while I was living out west, I started to hear from my kayaking friends from where I used to work teaching SUP. They would talk about this wave, Skookumchuck. Am I saying that right?
Yep, Skookum Chucknare.
Yeah. And that's when I first heard about this whole idea of river surfing. And obviously, I'd seen the wave pool thing and whatnot. But this looks a lot more wild. So I'm hoping maybe to start off, you can take us down maybe the history of river surfing or kind of a 101 on river surfing.
Yeah, for sure. So river surfing is still relatively new. Not surprised the interest is there, but like not a whole lot of knowledge. I think Canadians and landlocked Canadians especially are reaching for straws to find surf waves in any format that they can, from
Yeah,
kite surfing, Great Lakes surfing. And it's really cool that you've started this podcast because I think it brings to light a lot of that. And it's cool that you're reaching out to me and seeing what's up in the river as well.
right on,
Um,
thanks.
so I started river surfing in 2005, 2006, and around there. And that's about the same time, a little bit earlier, we started the Alberta River Surf Association. And that came out of sort of the World River Surf Association. That was sort of grassroots and more of a dream that kind of fizzled out. But in and around 2005, 2006 is kind of where this handful of like guys who had surfed around the world came together, and we were more like a drinking club with a surfing problem.
Okay, yeah.
So a couple of the guys would go out to the Kananaskis River, and there was kayak features that were built by the Alberta Whitewater Association. They actually had changed the river to form these sort of play waves that kayakers could, do their spins and tricks and all that good stuff in the river. And a couple of these guys who had surfed around the world were looking at it and saying, "Hey, maybe we can surf here too."
So wait a minute, you're saying they manipulated the river, like they put some kind of structure in place, or
So the Kananaskis River is one of my favorite places in the whole world. I guess we got to back this up just a little bit
yeah,
further.
yeah.
So it's in this beautiful provincial park, and the river is crystal clear. Of course, cold because it's pretty much coming out of the Rocky Mountains, straight unfiltered. But at the top of the Kananaskis River, we call it the Can, is the TransAlta Dam that does power generation. So, based on power needs and everything else, they will release that river and they produce power out of it. But when the river is flowing, they've created sort of a playground, a whitewater playground.
Hmm.
So, this started back in the 80s or so. And around 85 or sometime in around there, the paddlers had created almost like this internationally known, like a national level slalom course playground for whitewater paddlers. Like there was
Wow.
people coming to train for nationals, like right here, just outside of Calgary, and it was sort of this hub. And then I think other rivers started to get developed after that. But what's remarkable about our river is when the TransAlta does shut off the dam, it's not sort of like these other power stations where the river's always flowing and then they just pull the power as they need it. The river in the Kananaskis is a low flow river. We only have about 32 CMS, cubic meters per second. That's a pretty small river in terms of river. So it's about 100 feet across. Like you can throw a stone to the other side of the river. So when they turn that on and they're running power, it's a nice, it's a fair stream, enough to make a really great surf wave and have a great time. But when they turn it off, like the whole riverbed goes dry. So this is incredible because you can, like the feature that you're surfing, like over the where all the rocks shape to make the wave.
Yep.
The water turns off and you can actually look every rock and see how the water's rebounding off those rocks, how the rocks are shaping the wave, how everything's being influenced. You can find your fins when you bust a fin, because it happens in the rivers. You'll see it like in the riverbed afterwards when it's dried up. And it's pretty incredible. So the kayakers were originally building those features for those kayak competitions and freestyle kayaking. But when we came in around 2005 and 6, we were kind of tugging at their arms, their sleeve, and being like, hey, can we do something? And we were super eager and idealistic and really hopeful. So we started getting involved in the river construction that was happening at that time. But it took us probably a good 7 years. So a couple of years to sort of get into it and see how our relationship would build with the kayakers. And then around 2007, we started our project that in 2014, we unveiled the mountain wave. So if you've seen photos on Instagram or social or anything about river surfing in Alberta, typically you'll see it on the Kananaskis River. And that wave there is the mountain wave. And we, as a community, like the River Surf Association, actually pooled our funds together, got lots of donations of time and engineering and the material, like quarries had donated rock to us and everything else. And everyone was super passionate in getting this thing going. And we opened and unveiled the mountain wave. And yeah, it's like following the path of following in the footsteps of the kayakers. And having a river that shuts off, there was definitely some things working in our favor that not everybody else has to their advantage. But pretty incredible because this is the first sort of community-built surf wave that ever happened in the world. Other river surf waves have been built up to that point, but it was either a corporate effort or the government kind of came in and said, hey, let's try building one of these things.
Okay.
The first sort of by surfers, for surfers effort.
Nice.
Yeah. So I bet you're wondering how to build a river wave outside your backyard.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking, can you tell me where there is a river wave in Ontario in my area? Like, I'm super curious now. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's sort of two streams into how people start river surfing. And again, this whole culture, this whole scene is followed in the footsteps of kayakers. Like I can't give them enough credit. They were starting to get popular sort of in the late 90s. And then somewhere in there, the shape of a kayak actually changed. Okay. So they went from these sort of longer boats to something called a planing haul. And I don't know if you've heard about that in surfing, but
well, I know planing haul for, supboards and whatnot, as opposed to displacement haul.
Yeah, so the kayaks actually changed shape and took a page out of the book of surfing. Actually. Okay. So when they did the planing hauls, they got these kind of smaller freestyle boats, and they were able to generate a lot more speed. And then they're working on airs and maneuvers, all this kind of these big tricks and everything. But then the quest for bigger waves started. It was like, the last 30 years where kayaking had been happening, everybody's going through their memory of these runs they've done and think back and be like, hey, is there anything that we can surf back there? Well, that's awesome. They've been, out there finding all these amazing waves, and it's always good to be friends with kayakers because if you're not, they're not going to tell you where the waves are.
Yeah, but for real.
For a variety of reasons, like you've got to like I don't think anyone, river surfer, kayaker, or even these guys who are exploring the rivers on SUP as well, there's a certain degree of ability and skills, knowledge, experience that you sort of build up to. So there's definitely more like intermediate sort of entry level waves that you can find, and it's a little bit easier to get in there without any risk.
Hmm.
And then risk kind of exponentially increases after that. So these sort of naturally forming waves, or these sort of wild waves, I like to call them.
Okay.
There's lots of surfers out there who are sort of looking for these, and that's really exciting because if you can find a wave that it sort of has the right connection, the right sort of set of circumstances, like the sort of low risk, high reward. It's got to be a little bit more of a deep river channel with some nice eddies. There's not too many trees or like kind of obstructions or anything that's kind
Mm.
of sticking out into the river. You have
Yeah.
all these conditions, then it's amazing how much like exponential growth you can see in like one surfer becomes 2 to 10 to 20,
Yeah.
and it's just it doesn't slow down or stop until you got 30 people waiting in the eddy for their
Wow.
turn to surf, like every single day of all hours of the day.
Yeah. So forgive me. I just, I'm trying to wrap my head around this and picture it and understand it. So
Yeah.
somewhere like the Skookumchuck Narrows, is that what you'd call a wild wave, naturally forming? There was no manipulation there.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
the on the flip side of the coin, um, there are manufactured waves. And a lot of times you see a manufactured wave built as part of a whitewater park project.
Okay.
Whitewater parks are popular in kayaking, but they have a lot of different, we call them features. Um, Imagine if you were doing a skate park, you would build it for like all kinds of different skateboarding, and there's only sort of one half pipe in the whole skate park. So whitewater park has many different features, and sometimes they try for a surf wave and sometimes not. But they're up to until about 10 so years ago, surfing wasn't popular, and there definitely wasn't any surfers behind the whitewater parks projects. So there wasn't anyone there to say, hey, make it steeper, make it greener, make it curl, these kind of things that a surfer would be looking for.
Yeah.
If there was what they call a play wave and they were trying to make a play wave, there'd be a focus sort of on freestyle kayaking. So there are still some play waves throughout North America, especially. There's lots of whitewater parks. So I'll give you an example. In Boise, Idaho, they have it's an old irrigation dam that was sort of a hazard, and they went in and actually they're like, okay, we need to tear this out and put in a new structure that's safer, and they're just pulling water off for farmers' fields. So it's a very important structure for the livelihood, so people can eat in that area, right? So it's a very important feature. But when they started taking bids for companies who could do this, one of the companies who put the bid in said, "Hey, we can also do a recreational feature here. Like
Mm.
we'll build your dam that does irrigation, that diverts water for irrigation, but as a result, people will also be able to kayak here." And
Nice.
on top of that, that company was working on technology that could shape the wave in a really cool way, where you could hold kayaking competitions and all this kind of stuff. So that was a really great example where originally it was built as a play wave, but then the surfers took over. So in Boise, in the Whitewater Park there, you actually have their role, their name is a wave shaper, and the city employs them, and it's Paul Primus. So he's out there and he'll look and read the flows and kind of shape it up and down, and he has some manipulation of the wave there. And then they actually have to rotate kayak days for surf days. So
Okay.
then one day they'll have the kayakers on it, and the next day they have the surfers on it. So that's pretty new and exciting technology, and it's kind of weird because it's been around for maybe a decade now, and we haven't seen them pop up like skate parks everywhere. But
Yeah.
this is the sort of thing that's possible.
You know what's funny is as a stand-up paddler as well, that's sort of the bridge between kayaking and surfing. And so I can kind of, play both fields in a way. Like I've worked with a lot of kayak instructors, for example, but, I'm a surfer at heart. But those are really two distinct groups of people.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Some have talked about a sort of rivalry that's happening similar to the skiers and the snowboarders when
Oh, okay.
resorts wouldn't let snowboarders in. I don't think it's that big of a divide between the two of us.
Yeah.
I think when you have different crafts, I think you just automatically have sort of a divide because there's like a visual barrier that sort of separates you.
Mm,
But
yeah.
as soon as you're in the parking lot, like I have never had a bad time like chatting up a kayaker and
No,
or a surfer. Like as soon as you kind of strip that away and you're just talking about the stoke or you're just talking about surfing, like they surf too. So
for sure. Yeah.
like I think the more we share experiences with one another, I think the more it's bringing us together.
Yeah.
And we have
There's
so
enough
much to
wave
learn
for
from.
all of us.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, especially in the river because we don't have to like out paddle the guy next to you. Like we're all
Okay.
just taking turns, right? Like we
Yeah.
line up and if there's a kayaker in front of me in line, I'm not gonna like go in front of him and start
Yeah.
surfing. Everybody gets their turn.
Nice.
Yeah,
So take me back to the Kananaskis River then. So
yeah.
now you're telling me that the Kananaskis River Wave that you guys surf, the mountain wave, that wave, correct me if I'm wrong, that wave wouldn't exist if you guys hadn't done something to it, sort of
It
built it
it
up the
was
way you did, or
it was a completely flat stretch of river.
okay.
So the conditions that you need to build a river is they call it drop. There's actually a change in elevation. So if you're going down river, there a really wide, slow moving river probably doesn't have a lot of drop. And the Kananaskis is a mountain river, so it's moving quite fast. And we have about over the distance of 150 meters, you have about 1 meter of drop. So what you do is at a given place, we've built berms in the river. So those are just large piles of rock, and that backs up that 1 meter of drop. So from here to here, um, when you put in the rocks, it backs everything up so it's level, and then the opening of those two rock piles, where the water comes out, it's now going down 1 meter, and then we're shaping it back up again.
Wow, this is great news, man. Basically, you're telling me that we don't have to find a river that already is doing this. You can create this. So you just have to find a river, I'm sure, that has some kind of flow to it, but you don't have to find another Skookumchuck, is what you're telling me.
That is what I'm telling you, but
I
like,
love it. Yeah, let's do it, man. River waves everywhere.
but I have to like warn you as well that these projects to be able to make changes in a river, there is a lot of red tape and sort of government bodies that you have to go through. So
Okay.
I had the exact same response that you just did, and I'm sorry to like burst the bubble there because when I first learned about river surfing, like when we started our efforts to sort of build the mountain wave, I was traveling to these waves over in Europe, down in North America, like down in the States, and I was freaking out. I was like, we can build surf waves like skate parks. Like there is no
Wow.
question.
Yeah.
Like I have a promo video. I'll send it to you later. But I'm like,
Okay.
any river, any town, anywhere in the world, we're gonna surf. And I was like, rah rah rah. And then like 10 years later, we're like, we got one more wave. so
Progress.
so it's just there's a number of factors that goes into it, and it's a worthy cause, and there are a lot of people around the world working on building river waves right now, but it does take about 4 to 7 years. So even just like in Canada, for example, we have a Water Act application that you have to apply, and they just look at everything you're doing, dealing with Alberta parks. one thing that they've told us is like we can't use the perspective of just like, oh, I want this. They look at things in the terms of like, what is 100-year lifespan of this? What does this look like today? But what does it look like in 100 years from now?
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into it. Rivers are extremely important. They're
Yeah.
their own ecosystem. You know, they're basically the veins or the lifeblood of Mother Earth. So
Yeah.
um, I caution people to not get too excited, but it is a very exciting thing. But we can't just all go out and start hucking concrete boulders into
I
rivers and
guess.
hope
Yeah.
that surf right.
I
So
gotta say, man, I look out my front window and I'm looking at the Sydenham River. You kind of got, there's some construction going on there right now. They're building a new bridge. It's like, yeah, what if we dropped this huge pillar just about right there and put that other one over there? Wow, that's awesome, dude.
there's a huge potential. I think it's going to take
Yeah.
more time, and we need more proven examples of yes, this does work and it does last for 100 years and all the rest of it. Um, Tacking on to an existing construction project is a great way to get in.
Mm.
I think the most success that we're going to see like 4 or 5 new waves open in Europe in the next 2 or 3 years. I think what they focused on is trying to find maybe smaller rivers where the construction's not too intense, the outcomes aren't too detrimental to what was already there. They may be working in rivers where there was already a construction project or already a dam in that river, and also focusing on something where you can really have a positive impact on youth. Like, so it's surprising because I thought like Calgary's a big city. We've got 1 million people here. You know, if everybody just puts in $1, we can have $1 million surf wave in downtown Calgary. But I think that there is more benefit to these smaller communities that maybe don't have access to other sports.
Mm.
Like at the end of the day, even if a project costs $1 million to build a river wave, you know, that's still probably less than a skating rink, and it's going to be less ongoing maintenance and everything else.
Mm. Yeah.
Because the difference between building a river wave and say a surf park, where they're like a Kelly Slater's wave park or a wave garden or something like that,
Yeah.
there's still a huge operating cost.
Mm-hmm.
That's why people have to pay to use it. But a river is just running off of gravity. So once you
Yeah.
have the shape in place, you can just open this thing and you have people from all walks of life, you know, all backgrounds. You know, if you build it in a safe and friendly way, you don't have to charge money, you don't have to charge admission. You know, if this was downtown in some, you know, backwoods community, like kids who've got nothing else to do can go out and learn how to surf, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, man, this is game changing. I mean, I think the Great Lakes is a good illustration of this. The Stoke is alive. People, hey, they can't wait for the ocean. We make do with what we have, and it sounds like a river wave is even one more step of accessibility. Like I was thinking things like e-foils and some of those things were like, oh wow, it's getting easier to simulate that motion. Um, but what I think is appealing about the river is it's still that natural connection, you and nature.
For sure.
Yeah.
If I haven't sold you on it enough already, I'll give you one more kicker that I love about river surfing
Okay.
is, and there still might be some listeners who don't have like a full picture of it in their head yet as well.
Yeah.
But
I
a
gotta
surf,
say, I was sold pretty early on, man. I'm down, dude. I want that river wave. I'm thinking in my head as you're talking, I'm like, me and my wife are looking at property right now. We're gonna buy a house, and we're looking at by the lake. And some of these properties actually, the lake's sort of out front, and then there's some. Oftentimes, it's backed onto a river.
oh,
And
there
I'm
you go.
thinking, oh, okay, this river has to have certain characteristics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, waves on the lake in the morning, waves in the river at night. Come
Yeah.
back to the hot tub.
Waves all day. Perfect.
So the wave in a river is different from what you're surfing in the Great Lakes or on the ocean because it's actually a stationary wave. So the way that current moves through that constriction, where we've got the boulders the sort of boulder dam or the berms that we built up. So
Mhm.
that speeds up the water, it goes down the drop, and then it forms sort of a rapid in the river. And it's got a nice tall face so that we can surf from there with a surfboard. But the wave itself isn't a traveling wave like you would see in the ocean.
Yeah.
So because it's in one spot and we're lining up beside it and we're paddling in, popping up and doing our surf there, the wave doesn't actually go away. So when you have your sort of 30-second ride in the ocean and you're like freaking out and being like, that's the longest ride I've ever had in my life, like your legs
Yeah.
are getting sore because like it was some kind of point break and you just kept riding it and another wave came in and formed it back up again and you keep going and that's 30 seconds.
Yeah.
When we have a surf comp in the river, we have to have judges blow a whistle after 60 seconds and be like, that's the end of your ride.
Wow.
So I don't think that river surfing necessarily replaces ocean surfing. I don't think I could ever
Yeah.
make that claim.
Mhm.
But it's almost more like a treadmill or a climbing gym. Like we
Mm.
have all those conditions of our arena or our playground
I
where we
like
can
that.
try out maneuvers, gain strength, do everything we need for our bodies to work the way that we want them to work so that when we go out to the ocean, we're actually surfing on a higher level. And
Yeah.
for guys who live in Alberta, we still do trips out to the ocean. Sorry, guys and girls.
Yeah.
Guys is the whole package.
Yeah.
Everyone who's surfing in Alberta is still making these ocean trips. But what river surfing does is allows them to maximize their experience when they get to the ocean.
Yeah.
Because I was doing these big trips and spending quite a bit of money just to get on a plane and there's other costs to that, like the environmental cost of getting on a plane. And then you get there and you say you got a week in Mexico and you're like, okay, I got to surf for like 8 to 10 hours a day every day to get as much as I can out of this experience. But like
Yeah.
you're just relearning how to surf. Like arms and legs are exhausted the whole time. It's not a
Yeah.
really great experience in terms of what you get out of it.
For
Like
sure.
even just learning how to pop up again. It's like every time you go, you never get to the point where it's just second nature.
I want that consistency. We need that.
This is what I'm telling you, because if you
Yeah.
have a river wave in your backyard,
Yeah.
you get to work on all those muscles, and then like even just it's a crazy thing. On the river wave, I call it the home position. But if I'm ever having like sort of a bad session, or I'm getting grumpy because I'm not pulling off what I want, or I'm in my head too much,
Mm.
like you can be standing on the board on the wave and just like have this like half moment of like take a deep breath in, center yourself, let it all go, and then begin again.
Wow.
And that's so hard to do on an ocean wave. Like it's now or never.
Yeah.
Like you're never gonna surf this wave again.
Yeah. You're not going to regroup halfway. Like,
Yeah.
let me think of my tactics on this. How do I want to tackle the rest of this ride? Yeah. You're in the moment. Wow, man. Amazing. So, you know, originally when I was thinking of river surfing, I'm thinking rivers typically have a bunch of rocks in them. It comes to mind like whitewater rafting, that type of environment. But from the videos I've seen, so are you in pretty deep water? Is that fair to say? Away from any kind of rocks where you build these things?
It'll change from spot to spot. The
Okay.
Kananaskis River is quite a shallow river in terms of surf spots that I would like to go to. So personally, like if maybe you're looking more at sort of my stuff of kind of the spots that I like to go to, you'll see a lot more deep water waves.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's similar to the ocean where not everybody is hunting after the biggest wave. Some people are just happy to sort of catch the waves on the inside,
Yeah.
beach break, that kind of thing. Whereas I'm like the bigger the river wave, the better. Like
Mm,
I'll go as far out of the way as possible just to find like a bigger, wilder ride.
nice.
But really, these things come in all shapes and forms. And
Okay.
um, I guess I'm more interested. So even when I'm like going on the hunt to find new river waves and something no one has ever surfed before, I think still in my heart, what I'm ultimately looking for is a wave that a community can kind of form around.
Mm.
Like I said before, you're looking for a certain set of circumstances or characteristics that that river wave might have. But the other thing too is when you think about whitewater, or if you can picture yourself in that whitewater raft and you got your guide behind you and you got all these other guys and girls in the boats and you're paddling and you're hitting wave, 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 and
Yeah.
you're just kind of bouncing around like a pinball. Uh, those are all probably surfable waves in a
Mm.
way, but maybe not necessarily what a river surfer is looking for
Yeah.
necessarily. In the kayak community, they would call it a park and play feature. So this is something where you don't have a put in where you do a section of river and take out and hit stuff along the way, but you can actually park, kind of walk yourself in, do some surfing, get out, and then walk back to your car. This is a really great aspect to be able to have in a river wave. Like if you could
Mm.
park and see it from the road, then it's, there's no question that a community is going to start forming because the next person who's driving by and looks down and sees a surfer, they're like, okay, how do I do that? And then it
Yeah.
just, that's that exponential growth that I'm talking about. And then there's just certain level of safety that needs to be required in that park and play feature that it's not too daunting or intimidating, that people will be able to bring their friends out and have an extra surfboard kicking around and be like, hey, come on, let's try this out and see it grow in that way.
So in these communities, like your own, for example,
Mhm.
I mean, is there such a thing as river surfing schools? Like, are you taking people out, showing them how to do it, proper lessons?
Yeah, for sure. The whole idea around river surf lessons is sort of hit and miss around the world, which is a little bit surprising to me, but at the same time, totally makes sense. In the earlier years in Alberta, remember I was talking about that handful of guys that were kind of stupid enough or crazy enough to surf in a kayak sort of river that's like fed by a glacier, super cold. That we're not talking about like girls in bikinis and sandy beaches. Like this was
Yeah.
like a bit extreme and definitely on the fringe, and no one really knows about this. So it was kind of this sort of underground and not talked about thing. And we were such a tight knit group that we didn't really share that with a lot of people. We didn't really want to bring too many new people into it because it was it was almost a spiritual thing. Like it
Mm.
was like we found some sort of magic door into Narnia, and
Yeah.
we didn't want to just go back and tell the whole world what was going on.
Yeah. It's like you found the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, it was a lot like finding the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Well, especially when coming back from an ocean trip and I don't know, having mixed experiences in the lineup of like not feeling necessarily at home,
Yeah.
like getting some vibes, in the salty waves, and then coming home and everyone's like,
Mm.
"Hey, how is Costa Rica?" And like,
Yeah.
"Come on, let's go surfing." It was just such a welcoming vibe, and it was
Yeah.
such a like non-judgmental, supportive group that was on the
Mm-hmm.
river there that we didn't really share that too much. And then we got to a point where we were surfing all these kayak features, and we really wanted our own feature that was made by surfers for surfers, like a real surf wave on the can. And at that point, we sort of kind of weighed our options. And we're like, there's no way we can do this as the handful of guys we are. We're going to have to expand our community. Is everyone okay with this? Like, we're at the point now, if we want to build a better wave, we need to actually open the doors. Like,
Mm.
we know that there's going to be more people who are going to come out for this. Like, I even had surf friends because when I went to a school in University of Lethbridge, and we started a surf club down there. We do our reading week trips. We go down to Santa Cruz, California, load up the bus, take everybody down, and teach them how to surf. Like I had lots of friends who were surfers who liked doing
Nice.
ocean trips, and even some of them didn't want to try river surfing. They were like looking at the 6 millimeters of neoprene I've got to put on, and they're like, forget that. Like call me when you're
Yeah.
going to Mexico. I'll
Okay.
take the warm water. So we had to like really expand it to a point where this would be more appealing to more people. And when we did that, around that time, my friend and I started giving lessons. We started bringing more and more people into the community. And at that point, we didn't really know exactly how to be safe out there ourselves. Like, I think if you look that far back in our community, in our history, we weren't being the most responsible individuals.
Okay.
And we're also just a bunch of like dumb kids too,
Yeah.
right? Like with, full of stoke, but not much else.
Yeah.
So at that time, when we started building sort of the lessons curriculum, we also started taking safety a lot more seriously at that time. So part of the insurance requirements to have a lessons company was to have proper safety. So first aid, swiftwater rescue training, and just we started broadening our knowledge around rivers in general. Started reaching out to sort of the paddling groups or anyone with whitewater experience, and just taking that a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
So when I first started river surfing, I wore a helmet for about 2 years just to get the hang of it. And then I felt comfortable to the point where I could take that helmet off. But so that was a weird sort of circumstance where I'm taking lessons out, groups of 6 people, and teaching them how to surf. And I'm not wearing a helmet, and I'm asking them to wear a helmet. So there's all these kinds of things that we sort of had to figure out as we brought people in. And I think that maybe makes it that maybe puts up barriers for other communities. So I'm not totally positive, but I'm guessing the closest river surf community to you would be in Ottawa and Gatineau.
Okay. Yeah.
They've got a wave down there called Sewer Wave, and it's not firing year round like the Kananaskis Wave, but there's sort of spring and winter or late fall sort of windows where this thing is really good. It's a really
Okay.
and there's definitely a community that has built up around that wave, and there's almost been a need to form that community because the more surfers that come into it, the more sort of the more they're exposed to sort of risk. Like, if a board flies up, the leash catches it, flies it back, it can hit you in the head.
Yeah.
So things like that. So, excuse me, the formation of the community is about sharing good information. And like, I think everybody shares stoke and shares photos of them having a good ride, but at the same time, they're also sharing like, hey, I got caught up in those trees back there, and here's what I did to get out of it, and I just want you guys to know that as well.
Yeah.
So I can't think of off the top of my head anyone who's doing lessons in the Ottawa Gatineau like community, but I don't know if they're in a position where we were either, where they're asking themselves, do we really want to open the doors to this? Do we really want to start bringing people in, classroom sizes at a time? I was doing lessons of 6 to 1 teacher to student ratio.
Yeah.
But sometimes we'd have like a bachelor party, bring in an additional instructor, and like, okay, now we've got like 12 new people to the river. Like when we started, there was only 12 people, and then now we just brought 12 people in. So
Yeah. You doubled in a day.
like this thing can start growing quite
Yeah.
fast. When you do lessons, it starts to blow things up a bit. And I think a community needs to be in a place where they've sort of got their own stuff figured out ahead of time to be able to start introducing people. I think what I've seen in Alberta, at least, the sort of early movers or the people that have come to the river to explore river surfing in the early days, they can look after themselves a little more, or they're more risk adverse or more adventurous, or there's a characteristic or something in the fabric of their being that just kind of kept their eyes open a little bit more, or like they were just a little bit more aware that like this is a dangerous place. Like, you're jumping into a river, like you say, it has rocks, it has whitewater, it bashes you around. Like, you don't just turn the river off. Like, if it's got you, Yeah, it's got you. So
Yeah. So when you fall, wouldn't there usually be rock directly behind you that's helping to form that wave?
the berms are in front of the wave,
Oh, okay.
and the water's rushing past the berms. And in some wave features, there's something underneath the wave just to help shape it. But it's actually right in front of where your feet on the board would be. It's kind of where the nose of your board would be. And then what the wave is just this huge mass of water, and
Okay.
there's nothing in there.
Okay.
And when you fall, it's kind of like falling into that as a pillow, like you're going into the wave first before anything else. So there's a lot of cushion around you with that big mass of water if it's a
Okay.
good sized wave. But then after that, typically in rivers, you'll see a train, a wave train we call it, but you'll see one or two waves form behind the big surf wave. And what happens is it goes down before it goes up. So when you fall off, you go into this big pillow of water, but
Yeah.
then it gets shallow again before it gets deep again. So
Okay.
that's the part that's the real risk of hitting rocks.
Mm.
And then there's also this thing that people who are new to the river that is like a major no-no that you really have to watch out for is the natural state for people, I think, is to stand up. And I feel like if you were going down like a tobogganing hill and you're like, I don't like this, you just kind of stand up, or even just in ocean currents or like in a swimming pool or anything. It's like, I don't like this. You just kind of stand up. Like that's the default position of like, I want to be on solid ground again.
Okay.
But in a fast moving current, that's like almost the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
Trying to stand up in a fast moving current can expose you to things like leg entrapments or foot entrapments,
Oof.
where the current keeps going, but there's just this perfect foot-sized hole sort of in the rocks or the terrain where your foot goes in and catches and you keep going. So it just kind of will drag you down to the bottom of the river.
Wow.
So super scary stuff, but all stuff that you can manage. It's
Yeah.
just if you're looking at a river wave and you're like, that looks fun, and no one's there to sort of show you these things,
Yeah.
uh, you can put yourself into some dangerous situations.
Sounds like it. This sounds like an insurance nightmare. You got to have your ducks in a row before you just take 6-to-1 ratio students out with you.
Well, yeah, Swiftwater rescue training was a great course to sort of go
Okay.
through as an intro to all the things that can kind of go wrong. It's still really designed for a paddling community, a community who are using ropes and have things like carabiners on hand.
Mm.
And I think when you're in a boat, I don't know what your experience with stand-up paddleboard is, but I find that the community around paddling who are already in a boat don't really want to get out of their boat, and
Mm.
understandably, like they may not be dressed to be swimming all the time. But surfers, like you swim as much, well, more. You swim more than you surf because every time you surf, you fall and you have to swim.
Yeah.
So I think just really quickly we get a sort of comfort in the river.
Mm.
And so if I see someone who's sort of standing in a current, to use that example, the first thing I'm going to do is get onto my board and paddle towards them, as opposed to sort of looking for alternatives like getting a rope and trying to set up a rescue scenario with any kind of rope.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still work to be done in the river surf community in terms of safety, in terms of rescue, and sort of a basic foundational knowledge that needs to happen for instructors.
Yeah.
But there are so many resources out there, and I think anyone who has passion for river surfing and a keen mind and really goes after it, I think all those resources are available. It's just a matter of taking all the pieces and putting it together.
Do you have any resource materials, like a dissection of what a river wave looks like to construct it? What are the different elements? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, two great places for resources.
Okay.
So our association website is albertariversurfing.com.
Okay.
that's where you find more of the safety information, equipment information, and some stuff around community and just sort of etiquette of like
Okay.
that kind of thing. We've got a few videos on there, so it's a really great resource in terms of like what to expect in the river environment. In
Nice.
terms of dissection or any kind of like wave anatomy or how river waves are formed, that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, I would check out our website
Okay.
surfanywhere.ca. So Surf Anywhere started as in 2007 when the association was like, "Hey, we need a wave. What the heck are we going to do?"
Okay.
We actually started this thing called the Surf Anywhere project, and like,
So wait a minute. You guys had a river surfing association, but you didn't have a wave yet?
well, back when we were surfing the kayak features.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the difference there is in a river, you'll find things called a hole or a wave. And a hole is like riding the whitewash,
Yeah.
and riding a wave is like riding a green wave in the ocean. So we
Okay.
were basically just riding the whitewash, right?
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
it does.
we were looking to stack up a nice, clean green surfable face.
Right on. You're trying to create Jaws in Alberta.
Yeah, there you go. Well, at one point we were like, should we call it the pipeline project?
Yeah. That might upset a few people. Yeah.
Yeah, pipelines, right? So what we ended up doing is like crowdfunding was this like new thing that people hadn't really heard of at the time, and there was this thing called Kickstarter, but
Yeah.
like that was still only in the States only at the time.
Okay.
So we actually like built this whole thing on Indiegogo where we wanted to, and we started like interviewing like engineers and surfers and everyone around the world and like going and visiting these places. And our big plan, the Surf Anywhere project, was to sort of create and release the plans on how to build a surf.
Oh,
Like
okay.
here's the perfect way. And I think going through that process, um, what we learned was that the wave technology isn't really what's holding us back. So I think the physical, like if you look at physics, the physical properties that form a stationary wave in a river, um, it's known as a hydraulic jump, and it's like this like normal thing that occurs in nature, and like it's sort of a basic course in engineering at university, and they're just like, hey, let's look at hydraulic jumps today, and like that's not really what's holding us back. And I
Okay.
think if at any moment a city, a municipality, a government was like, hey, let's build a river wave, here's the money to do it, I don't believe that they would have any problems in creating a successful surf wave if they were targeting a surf wave and not a whitewater park. But I think we needed to go through that whole experience to be able to sort of learn that. To like, we wanted to like unlock some sort of barrier. I think we did that. Um, so since then, Surf Anywhere has sort of changed shape, and it's more now like we actually formed it into a corporation so that we would be able to consult on river projects.
Wow. Okay.
So now we have people from around the world, like lots of communities in Europe and some down in the States. The States is a little bit different because of, like you say, insurance nightmares, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we have a really good perspective where we're able to, just like in like plain conversations, the way we're talking now, is just sort of um, tell a surfer how to sort of avoid some pitfalls or some dead ends, as well as kind of give them tools and resources to really making convincing arguments into building riverways. Sort of the things that a government is looking for. I'll give you a great example. Something that always comes up when you're interacting with rivers is the surrounding citizens, the people who live in that town, want to know about flooding. Because
Okay.
if you were to build sort of the same rock berms that we have in the Kananaskis, for example, in a different location, if you don't look at flooding concerns, you're actually creating a dam. And
Mm.
under high water conditions, the water doesn't have anywhere to go but up and over the banks. And then you can be looking at flooding homes.
Oh, wow.
So that was looked at very early on in this group of river surfing engineers who are like, okay, what do we need to do? So questions like that can be answered. And it's important to know that there's different types of features or different methods of building river waves. And it's not so much, we're trying to figure out what works where. It's just a matter of looking at all the other stuff. Um, like they actually did studies in Munich, Germany. That's one of the most popular river waves you'd ever see. It's on the Eisbach River, and it's right downtown Munich. And it's been running. They've been surfing there for almost 50 years now.
Wow.
So you talk about a community. Like there's like thousands of surfers who would call the Eisbach their like local break.
Okay.
And so they did studies there about just fish habitat, and they through the research that they did, they can actually show that fish can't swim up that current. Like if you have um, uh, the shape of a wave that's really good for surfing, it's very likely that a fish over a certain size won't be able to swim upstream.
Okay.
So like that's terrible for their habitat because if they have spawning habits or anything where they need to have a lot of momentum or movement through rivers, then you just put this huge barricade for them.
Yeah.
So another thing that we did there is we just have this thing called a fish passage. So in every wave that we build, it's just this little sort of like escalator for fish, and they're just like, yeah, we'll take this way. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
there's ways around it all, and I think
Well, this is bringing to mind to me. It's reminding me of a fish ladder. I'm thinking
fish
I
ladder.
could just imagine like a wave breaking next to the fish ladder, watching the salmon jump.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Gotta do that in BC.
Yeah. So, before you started surfing this wave is it Kananaskis or Kanaskus?
Kananaskis.
Kananaskis. Before you started surfing the wave on Kananaskis River, I mean, you must have surfed somewhere else to even want to surf a river wave. So, sort of, what was that progression like, man? Would you go, on a family trip to the Bahamas and get stoked and come back? Like, walk us through that.
Yeah. So yeah, surfing was probably the furthest thing from my head growing up. Like growing up in Canada, playing hockey. Like, yeah, definitely didn't think I was gonna grow up and be a surfer by any means.
Yeah. Did you grow up in Calgary proper?
Yeah, I'm from Okotoks, so it's just south of Calgary.
Okay.
And like I have a big family. I have three brothers, and they've got a bunch of kids, and so like I'm pretty close to Calgary. I'm pretty close to my family. But in university, I had a cousin who was looking at the working abroad program, and she was going to go to Australia, and she's like, "You should come with me." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds cool." And she pretty much signed me up, like did all the paperwork because she just wanted me to come with her and to be able to have some. And I'm so happy she did. Um, so we were there for maybe a week, and like surfing was on my brain at that point. Like I was starting to wonder, like, am I going to be able to surf there? Like
Yeah.
that sounds pretty cool. And then within a week, we had been signed up for a surf safari. So from Sydney to Byron Bay, and like it was like 5 days, the best 5 days of my life, kind of thing. Like the
Nice.
very first day, I was like paddling in the wash, first time out, like popped right to my feet, and I don't know, I was just hooked. Like there
Wow.
was something about that. Like I rode a green wave on like my third day, but we had like one-on-one instruction.
Stop it.
No, seriously, like
Wow.
it was an incredible experience just because like Australia riding up the coast, like the instructors, we had 6 instructors and there was maybe 15 of us.
Yeah.
And you could tell who was really into it. They would get more attention.
Okay.
You would just like look out the bus, check the swell reports, but like basically just like looking and spitting into the wind like old school surfer stuff. Like, yeah, this looks good, pull over. And then we would just have primo waves. Like I don't know if I've had waves that good since, to be
Really?
honest.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was just like really beautiful, small, slow rollers, just like long spread out like waves. And it was just made for a surf school. So
Yeah.
it was pretty easy to pick it all up. You know what I mean? So So coming home, like I knew I was hooked. Like I stayed in Australia for 8 months, and I was surfing there like as often as I could. And I did continue my progression, which was really good. Like I got into some big wave riding and all that kind of stuff, which I think being a 21-year-old kid, I had a certain level of fitness and lack of fear that just I was sort of in my prime to be able to take that on at that time.
Yeah.
So coming home, I I was like a little bit lost, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I got into first I got a longboard, skateboard, and then I got into snowboarding. Um, like anything I could do to sort of like tap into that feeling, but
Yeah.
nothing was like, it was all good because I was like, I was a surfer now. My friends are like,
Yeah.
you changed, dude. but
Yeah.
but
What
like,
happened to you, man?
and then when so I had a friend who was in that U of L surf club when we came back from Santa Cruz. He was going to school in Calgary. I was going to school in Lethbridge, and he sends me this newspaper clipping, and it's a picture from the Calgary Herald, and he's surfing. We actually have another wave in Alberta, and it's downtown Calgary, but it's just this tiny little ankle biter of a wave.
Okay.
And he sends it down to us like through the mail, and I get this picture of Jeff Brooks surfing this tiny little wave, and I just had to laugh. And I wrote him back and I was like, there's no way you'll see me surfing on that little river wave. Like, this is
Okay.
ridiculous. So I just totally wasn't into it, sort of laughed it off.
Yeah.
But Jeff got me into the river like that spring. So he took
Okay.
me out to the Kananaskis. And that's where he had connected with the other four guys who were starting the River Surf Association. So he learned on 10th Street. Meanwhile, these other guys were learning on the Kananaskis and figuring
Mm.
out they could do that. So those two parties met, and then I came into the picture on the Kananaskis.
So it's
And
you got two crews. You got this like 10th Street crew and the Kananaskis crew.
well, like, yeah, like 10, 15 years later, there's actually sort of two crews.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
in the beginning, it was like two guys had started in the can, and Jeff,
Yeah.
this other guy, Chris, had started at 10th Street, and then, yeah, they'd met up with one another. But
Right on.
yeah. And then, so the way that Jeff introduced me to the river, and like when I grew up, I would swim in the river as a kid.
Mm.
Because like I love swimming. I did lifeguarding. Like I was always a water person. So
Yeah.
I would love just kind of like floating down the river or doing tube rides. But I had never been in anything like whitewater.
Yeah.
And so we park at the Kananaskis sort of at the top end, and we grab our surfboards, we suit up, and Jeff's like, okay, we're going. And we jumped into the river at the top, and we floated down to where the wave was. And it was that whole whitewater experience. Like we were like
Wow.
going
Yeah.
through rapids and like going underwater and like duck diving waves and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So that was pretty intense, but like that
Yeah.
didn't really shy me away from it. That got me hooked even
So
more.
you were like in a prone surf position doing this?
Prone. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And paddling too, because when the water goes over a drop and really speeds up to hit a rapid, you don't want to get caught behind it. Like it'll
Yeah.
tumble you more. So like when you're coming up on a rapid, you're like giving the gas, like you're paddling, like you're paddling for a wave, and
Yeah.
then like crashing right through it. So
Wow. I can't imagine explaining that to my mom. Where were you after school? Good luck. Yeah, right. Never again.
So
Wow.
we got down to the where the wave was, and this was a completely different feature. It doesn't even exist anymore. But when we paddled into that, Jeff showed me how to do it, and I stood up again first, and it was just that same feeling that I felt in Australia, like that
Hmm.
first day I was on the ocean with a big 12-foot foam top. Like I was on this little tiny ankle biter, like whitewash of a river wave, but it was just like there's just something to it that was like, okay, this is it. And then after that, like river surfing was sort of always this thing that I did to scratch the itch. And I was
Yeah.
still making ocean trips. I would still take months off at a time and go move. Like I lived in Halifax for a little bit. I lived in Tofino for a summer.
Oh, nice.
Like I'd be all over trying to like live the surfer's life.
Yeah.
I'd always get pulled back to Calgary. Like I'd always get homesick, miss my friends, miss my family. And I think that that feeling of feeling that surf again, but then also just like that being amplified by feeling what it was like to surf in my home.
Hmm.
Like I'm not flying across the world in a completely different time zone. Like this was my home. Like, these are sort
Yeah.
of the roots that I grew up around. So like the whole package just started to like it started with a tease, but then it just kept pulling me in.
But had you sort of accepted the fact? Had you said, okay, I'm hooked to surfing, but I'm just going to have to go on trips, and live in Calgary and bite the bullet? Had you sort of said that to yourself?
I was I was teetering between like I, I was sort of living in two worlds where there might still be a way that I could live on an ocean beach somewhere. I could still
Okay.
be a surfer. And every time I was in Calgary for too long and not feeling that, I would drop everything and go find that again. But as soon as I'd find that, more and more I'd start to miss home.
Gotcha.
And so I think what ultimately happened was river surfing gave me both. And
Nice.
it wasn't the wave on the Kananaskis and it wasn't the wave of 10th Street because for me like I really love just being out in nature. I love the physical activity. I love all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All the things that make surfing so great. That's all there with the waves in the can and 10th Street. That's all there, but it's not enough of a like a meaty beefy wave for me. So as soon as I started turning my surf travel from getting on a plane to getting in a car,
Mm.
and if you drive, 10 hours in any direction from Calgary, there are some incredible waves. And
Okay.
like I've surfed river waves that are head high, like Skookumchuck is an overhead sized wave.
Yeah.
And, like driving to Skook from Calgary is the same distance as driving to Tofino. But the
Mm.
difference is you can set your watch to when it's going to break, and then your ride times are going to be, 5, 6 minutes long on a monster
Yeah.
overhead wave. So
Wow.
it just became more of a hunt for the standing waves for me, and less of an appeal to sort of get vibed in a salty wave lineup.
Yeah.
That's my experience at least.
So what's your full-time gig? Is surf anywhere? What keeps you busy or
Yeah, so I have just a regular 9 to 5 job, like everybody else.
oh, you're just a regular old muggle like everyone else. Okay.
Yeah, I did. Like I sort of had like a 2 year expiry date on any job that I worked for a long time, and that's sort of when I get that itch of like I had, I was really good at saving once upon a time, and it
Mm.
was just kind of always like the surf fund, and then as soon as that'd be big enough to go live somewhere for a few months, I'd be out of there.
Yeah.
Um, but so I was in one of my recent quit my job and try and do surfing. So I was teaching surf lessons full time. I had started a shop. I was selling these like foam boards just to get people into the river.
Yeah.
So at that point, I'd like sold maybe 100 boards or just under 100 boards, like getting this community going. Everything was great. And then winter hit, and I was like, oh shit,
Yeah.
what am I gonna
What's
do
the
for the next
contingency plan?
five,
Yeah.
6 months? So one of the surfers offered me a job, and we do audiovisual installation. So it's just a trades job, but I really like the challenges that come with it. And I'm kind of a sort of an audio visual guy. Like before that, I was doing communications and graphic design, website building, brand building. So this was more of a
Nice.
technical side of things, like putting up a
Okay.
projector, and it was just kind of it's good, stable work, and it's a new challenge all the time. So I think that that really helped me in the way that I could, um, when I was devoting my time full time to all the river surfing stuff, I think I was trying to push too hard.
Mm.
I was almost like it didn't feel like a natural, organic progression, and I was
Gotcha.
almost trying to force it. Whereas
Yeah.
having a stable income has given me the freedom to put my energy into the areas that I think really need it.
Yeah.
And more recently, I've taken a step back from sort of our home community, like in Alberta.
Okay.
I think in a healthy way, I've sort of gone through stages of burnout, and
Okay.
there's been times where I've been trying to do too much, um, sort of just on my own. I know, like our president of the River Surf Association is in a similar boat where now he's got a wife, two kids, and he's still trying to do everything we were doing back when we were these kids in our 20s. And it's just hard to balance all that.
Yeah.
So now we're in a position where there are a lot of people have stepped up to be able to help. Um,
Nice. Next
and
gen.
yeah, and there's things that we have started that we don't necessarily have to be there to help run, all that kind of stuff. That now there's some momentum there, and it feels really good to just answer an email here and there or a phone call here or there, and not have to be like the guy. Like,
Okay.
you need a surfboard. Oh, Jacob's the guy. Like, go talk to the guy. Like, that was fun, and it was really cool to see everybody who had come in. Like, there was a time that if someone was river surfing, they would know who I was, and like that feels good. But I think it
Yeah.
was too
And
much
you know
ego for
them.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would know them for sure. But now it's good that this thing almost has a life of its own. That if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, that it's gonna keep going. And I think
Yeah,
that that was an
absolutely.
important part that I needed to build into it for myself.
So what's the sensation like surfing a river compared to surfing a, regular green wave or whitewash either in the lake or the ocean?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. I think it needs that for me to really get hooked. Like I've been on, like, for example, a flow rider. I don't know if you've seen those, but it's way more like a skateboard on really fast moving water.
Is this
And
like the skate park thing? Or sorry, the surf park, because it looks like they're almost on like a standing on a boogie board or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that.
you've just got like, and the ground underneath it isn't actually hard either. So it's almost
Yeah.
like a trampoline thing or like a
Okay.
wrestling mat.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's super fast water rushing over, and then you're on a board that's just like an oversized skateboard or like boogie boards they'll lay down. But like I couldn't get it, and
Yeah.
maybe I'm like biased because it like defeated me, and I don't like
Yeah.
to get
It's
defeated by it.
it seems like the same premise as an air hockey table. Like you're
Yeah,
just kind of hovering over the surface. Okay.
good Canadian reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely air hockey. So with a river wave, you have fins. The board's the same. The fins are the same. You're driving in, like sinking a rail and like spraying out
Hmm.
all from your fins, and it's the same way in that sense that I think that that's where that's the feeling of euphoria that keeps pulling me back in.
Yeah.
Like really sinking into a green wave. Like sometimes in a session, it only takes one turn. It's not even like that one wave where you like connected a few turns, but like sometimes all it takes is just one turn, and like that's enough in my stoke bank to like carry me out for the next month.
Nice.
But yeah, river waves are really interesting. It's hard to find um, waves the size of ocean waves in the river, and if you do, they typically only last for a couple weeks. Like 6 weeks would be a really long session on a river wave.
Okay.
So what we're surfing in the other times throughout the year, like at 10th Street and Kananaskis, or really sort of these other communities who have built up communities around waves. It's really just keeping your legs, like keeping all the fitness there, like doing everything you can so that when that high water, like that spring runoff hits, and those river waves are really jacking up and getting to those perfect conditions, or like the wave that's just an hour away, it's just coming in now because the river's high enough for it to work, then you're ready. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You've got all the skills and all the fitness is there for when you really need it. So river surfing is interesting. Like the one thing that I like about it, the gift that river surfing has given me in that sort of that home position or that home moment that I talked about
Yeah.
is like really being able to look around more. I think that
Mm.
I've river surfing in general doesn't give you this, but I think it allows for this is that you can slow things down a little bit more.
Mm.
And that's the kind of surfing that I really like to do, or what I'm trying to do. Like, I'm not really watching the WSL much, but I love to watch guys like Rob Machado, who like, or yeah, who just put a lot of style into their turns, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of like zen and finesse that goes into it.
You had a video with Rob Machado in it. I didn't watch the whole thing through. Did he come check out the river situation?
That's a good one. You got to watch that one through.
Okay, I better
he,
watch it through.
he was just surfing in Munich, and it was like a layover. Like, he was there for just enough time to be able to get in Munich and catch some waves. And yeah,
Okay.
so one of our friends, Bjorn, like went to the airport. He's like waiting for his flight, and like got him on camera just to see, like what his impressions of the surf scene are.
Oh, nice.
There's been a lot more pros who have surfed the Munich wave.
Okay.
Yeah, like if you shout out a name, pretty much everybody's done it.
Have any of these guys come to the Kananaskis River?
No.
Oh, okay. Not yet.
um, like, I think the wave 2.0, like we're still continuing to develop in that river, and to do what we really want to do takes a huge amount of effort from engineering,
Yeah.
and we don't have anyone on the board of directors who's like a full-fledged engineer who can stamp a drawing. So we have
Gotcha.
some limitations of what we're doing, but yeah, Neil's working on some modeling with the University of Ottawa right now, or University of Ontario. But the modeling that we're doing there is like what's possible in a river hasn't been tapped yet.
Nice.
The kind of waves that we're showing in modeling would make a pro actually freak out. Be like, yeah, okay, I can check out this river surfing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't know a whole lot about river surfing, so this might be the stupidest question ever. But is there a competitive scene? Is that a thing? Okay, are there pro river surfers?
I wouldn't go as far to say there's pro river surfing.
Okay.
Maybe. So competitions are still new, and it's an exciting time because there's still big question marks around how to judge river surf competition.
Yeah.
So this will vary from community to community, and there is some communication in between those communities, but we're not so close that it's a hive mind. Like, I think everyone's still trying to figure it out in their own way. But what you have with the standing wave is you can judge river surfing in a river surf competition. You can judge it much more like skateboarding, or say when snowboarding is in the Olympics for their half pipe. You can score just based on tricks. So like way or maneuvers like 180s, 360s, pop shove-its, big spin, like these sort of like, I would look more to wake surfing. If you look at what a wake surfer, a pro level, high level competitor who's doing wake surfing, what kinds of things they're doing on the wave, you can look at river surfing and judge in a very similar way.
Oh, okay.
But then there's this whole stream of thought of the soul surfers like myself who are coming into rivers and saying we cannot lose the aspect of what makes surfing so beautiful, the dance of it all. You can't lose that to have someone stand on their board in the middle of a wave and just bust trick after trick after trick.
Yeah, I like that language.
I don't really want to see that. Like, for me as a judge, when I'm judging the surf competitions in the Kananaskis, we're using an adapted WSL format where things like power and carves are worked into the judging category. So if you can pull off a really impressive maneuver, it's great. But if you can pull it off with style, if you can pull it off with power, like if you can make it look really good and push it right to the limit of the wave, then in my opinion, you're going to score a lot higher than if you just throw the trick in the middle of the wave.
Okay.
Yeah. So the surfing has been around the longest in Munich, Germany. And out of Munich, they've grown, it's called the Rapid Surfing League. So they actually have sort of, and this just started in 2019 and 2020 has been a weird year, so they haven't had a lot of it.
Really? Why?
There hasn't been much growth and progression there this year
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. But they have like 4 or 5 stops on a tour that they do.
Wow.
And Quirин and the team behind Rapid Surf League has done a really good job of bringing a lot of Groms into the sport, pulling these kids, these guys and girls who are like 18, 19, 20 years old, who grew up surfing in Munich on a river wave, and sort of getting them in the competition mindset so that they can maybe one day represent Germany for surfing in the Olympics.
Mm.
And they're not shitting around. Like, this is really an honest to God goal of theirs. And a lot of these kids, so they're doing they're surfing on all these stationary waves, but then they'll also compete in ocean competitions and scoring
Nice.
really high, like on a European level, maybe not the
Wow.
world stage, because to go up against other kids from Hawaii or Australia, maybe not so much, but in terms of European surfing, they're scoring really well, like on podium levels against all the other European like beach nations. So
Yeah.
it's really cool, and I think it's that sort of treadmill idea of a stationary wave being able to like just hammer out your tricks and maneuvers just like time after time after time. The wave's
Nice.
always doing what it's going to do, so you've got to learn how to adapt your surfing to make sure you pull it off.
Right on. So you've done some judging then?
Yeah, I'm not like personally, I'm not as much into the competition side of things.
Yeah. Did you ever compete, or was that a thing for you, or?
Yeah, so I started out competing with the Alberta crew. Like, there's a video of us like doing our very first surf event in the Kananaskis. The name that came up, we were looking at doing a surf slam that wasn't overly competitive, that still had like the idea of having it as slam is like this fun event for everybody. And Paul came up with the name Slam the Can, which was
Nice.
a great name for everybody. And like I said, we started out as a drinking club with a surfing problem.
Yeah.
So Slam the Can had a 10-year progression where we, in 2006, started as a sort of grassroots thing all the way up to 2016 was like our biggest year. We had maybe 150 people out just camping right on the river at the wave for a weekend with involving sponsors and a whole lineup of bands, like 3 or 4 bands and 3 or 4 DJs playing, like this whole big experience, and then all the funds raised going into developing the river and building waves. So through those 10 years and that 10-year progression of that event, I've done everything from been a competitor, a judge. I've like taught judges, like put on a clinic in order to have our judges learn how to judge, all that kind of stuff. So
Nice.
after 10 years, you kind of have to wear many hats.
Gotcha. So you would consider yourself you were a competitive surfer, Canadian competitive river surfer, but you wouldn't say you were a pro surfer. You weren't on the WSL roster or something.
I think you're a professional when someone pays you to do something. So
Nice.
That's why I'm saying I don't think we have any professional river surfers at the moment. If you go to Germany, there are definitely river surfers who have a board full of stickers of all their sponsors who are getting paid to compete, and
Gotcha.
they're also going to the ocean, and they're in that realm of surfing is an Olympic sport now, and we need every country to work on their competitors. So there's some really great opportunities, especially with the Groms over in Europe, and I'd love to see that happen in North America. Like if you go to Bend, Oregon, I think there's a really great scene there, and they're really early on in their competitions. They've run, I think, 2 now, more with the mindset of it being a slam and not being overly competitive. But I have a love and a hate for it. I think every time I compete, I get this weird feeling in my stomach of like, I hate this. Like, I'm so frustrated. And on game day, I never perform. Like, I always feel way better when there's not a judge looking at me and all the rest of it, or cameras or anything like that. but also knowing that a competition was coming up, I would always work harder. I would always push myself harder. And I think that that's an important thing, especially with the youth that are coming into the sport. And I
Yeah.
think that they're really like giving them the ability to show off what they've been working on in front of a stage, give them a stage. I think that that pushes everything forward. And I would never do anything to stop that or kind of stifle that at all. I just think that there needs to be a healthy environment for that to happen, where it's
Yeah.
not becoming this aggro localism, you can't surf here kind of mentality. I think
Yeah.
in the river, everyone's welcome, and it needs to stay that way.
I agree, man. What a perfect way to kind of cement the end of the show here as we wrap up.
Right on.
I gotta say, dude, we're gonna have to do a part 2 because we haven't talked about any of your film work. The word Afghanistan hasn't even come up in this
Yeah,
conversation.
true.
There's a lot more to go over. You have surfed 100 river waves across the world, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So there's lots more stuff to talk about here. But for today, we'll cap it off at that, my friend.
Good.
Before I let you go, you got anything you want to say to the audience or anyone thinking of, dipping their feet into the river? Any words from the wise or anything like that?
Yeah, it's still kind of hard to break into the river surfing scene. There's definitely a lot of resources online, but
You should
yeah, I
probably
would
know
just
somebody, right? You don't just show up there with your board and jump in, right?
well, you can like in downtown Calgary, if there's a lineup at the 10th Street Wave and somebody just shows up with a board, I've seen it happen. Like it happens, and it's like, hey man, what's your name? Like, can I give you some pointers? And it happens for sure. It
Okay.
happens, and this is what I'm saying. Like, if people are thinking about this, like just yeah, don't let anything get in your way. Like if you wanna start river surfing, like get out there, find out where they are river surfing. Maybe don't just go out to what looks like a wave and not tell anybody you're gonna do it and get yourself into a dangerous situation. But go check out Ottawa and Gatineau. Like they've got a Facebook page, or wherever you are in the world. Like just do some research and find out where river surfing's going on.
Yeah.
Like even if you got to drive, make a little road trip out of it. Throw your sup on the car as well. Like rivers are great for that. Like just make it a whole experience. If you're going to Bend, like grab a mountain bike. Like there's lots to do
Yeah.
in these places. But then, like I know guys and girls who've said they saw river surfing, they're like, oh, that looks so cool, I want to try it. But it was years before they like found their way in. And yeah, I'm just saying get out there and see if you can make it happen. And we need more people in the river, like more people building waves, more people finding these mystery waves that are out there. So yeah, I really encourage everybody to get out there and give it a shot.
Right on. Dude, it's killing me, man. I wish I would have reached out to you like in one of the first episodes I did because I was still living in Vancouver
Oh yeah.
and you could have been a stop on route to
Oh
Ontario
yeah, for sure.
because, I drove through Banff. I wanted to see Lake Louise. You couldn't even get a damn parking spot, so that didn't happen. But we just kind of, actually, no, we went up to Drumheller. But man, I should have come and seen that surfing scene. So it's hard for me to even believe that you're sitting here talking to me right now because you got a surf spot firing all the time. Like you don't have to look at the weather. What's the wind going to be? What are the conditions? Is it better at Cox or is it better at, North Chesterman?
Yeah,
You got this wave just there.
it can
That
be
is
very
incredible, man.
addicting.
Wow, I guess. Jeez, like, man, marriage is hard already. Wow.
I was gonna
You,
say it's ended a few marriages, but I won't get into that.
yeah, no, man. Maybe it's better that I don't have a river wave right now.
Yeah.
Wow. You'd easily spend a lot of hours there, I'm sure.
Well,
So,
keep
dude,
doing what you're doing. Get this podcast out to the people. They got to hear. And yeah, if you need a river guy, if you got more questions and stuff, just sprinkle me in here and there. I'm sure a lot of your listeners don't want to hear about rivers every episode, but we'll have our time to chat.
This isn't the river show, but it's
That's right.
certainly a part of it. And even my brand, Freshwater Surf Goods, it leans heavily towards Great Lakes just because that's what I know. But river surfing is definitely something I'd like to explore more, and possibly even talk to you at some point about, if I can create some cool designs that might sell for that crowd. Like, that's what I'm all about. I want to share that stoke. And I think as Canadians, I'm trying to create something that speaks more to our jive, so
Right on.
so that would be cool, dude. All right, man. All I gotta say to you, dude, before you go is stay stoked, bro.
Yeah, stay stoked. Right on.